The worn leather of Liam's truck steering wheel felt familiar under his calloused hands, a small comfort in a life he'd carved out of solitude. At 28, his days in construction were a rhythm of sweat and dust. His nights in a small, utilitarian apartment, a quiet echo of his own carefully constructed isolation. 2 years it had been since he'd last ventured into the awkward dance of a date. Tired of the polite rejections, the subtle judgments, he'd learned to prefer the clean lines of solitude, where expectations couldn't shatter. Then Maya, his oldest friend, called, her voice a warm, exasperated breeze against his carefully built walls. Liam, you can't just fade into the background forever. One blind date. If it's a disaster, I'll buy your beer for a month. Her words, familiar and true, chipped away at his resolve until he found himself agreeing, if only to silence her loving persistence. What was the worst that could happen? Another evening to add to the forgotten ones. The cafe was a hushed sanctuary on a quiet street. Its exposed brick and mismatched wooden tables bathed in the soft glow of amber lights. The air, thick with the aroma of roasted coffee and the sweet hint of cinnamon, hummed with muted conversations. Liam arrived early, a habit etched into him by demanding job sites, and chose a table by the window, a strategic vantage point for both observation and retreat. He thumbed through his phone, rehearsing polite escape clauses in his mind. The hiss of the espresso machine, a counterpoint to his inner monologue. Then she walked in. Laura. She paused just inside the door, a subtle tightening around her mouth, as if bracing herself. Her shoulder-length brown hair was tucked behind one ear, revealing the delicate curve of her jaw. And her eyes, a wary shade of hazel, swept the room with a quiet apprehension that mirrored his own. She wore a loose gray long-sleeved shirt and wide-leg jeans, her posture hinting at a desire to disappear. Their gazes met across the room, and a quiet current seemed to hum between them. She offered a small, hesitant nod before making her way over. "Hi, you must be Liam," she said, her voice soft, a gentle vibration that settled in the quiet space as she sat down. Her smile was a practiced thing, polite, a shield that didn't quite reach the depth of her eyes. "Yeah, that's me, Laura, right?" He extended a hand, and her grip was firm but fleeting, a brief brush of skin that left a subtle warmth in its wake. The initial minutes were a cautious dance, a surface-level exchange of occupations. She was a nurse, specializing in burn care. "Sounds intense," he murmured, noting the quiet strength in her response. He spoke of concrete and frames, the honest satisfaction of creation, even if it was just another house. The air between them, however, felt heavy with something unspoken. A mutual, unspoken acknowledgement of the fragility of connection. Then, a shift. Laura's gaze dropped to her sleeve, her fingers tracing the cuff with a nervous energy. "Look," she began, her tone shedding its polite veneer, becoming starkly matter-of-fact. "I might as well get this out of the way." Slowly, deliberately, she rolled up her sleeve. A landscape of scars, thick, raised lines of healed burns, twisted from her wrist, disappearing beneath the fabric towards her shoulder. They weren't faded memories. They were a raw, permanent testament, a roadmap of past pain etched into her skin. Liam didn't flinch. His gaze held hers, unwavering. The cafe sounds, the clink of cups, the murmur of voices receded, leaving only the quiet pulse of his own breath. "No one wants to date me, you know," she stated, her voice calm, almost detached, as if she were reciting a well-worn truth. Her eyes searched his, waiting for the pity, the polite excuse, the inevitable withdrawal. The words hung in the air, heavy with honest resignation. He could feel the soft thrum of the espresso machine, the faint scrape of a chair, but his world had narrowed to her, to the audacious vulnerability she offered so early, so unapologetically. She wasn't hiding, she was testing, offering him an escape before a deeper tether could form. Gently, Liam reached across the table, his fingers brushing the edge of her sleeve, a feather-light touch. Without a word, he slowly pulled the fabric back down, covering the scars again, not out of discomfort, but a profound, unvoiced respect. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, but she didn't pull away. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice steady, meeting her gaze. "And I think if I walked out now, that's what I'd regret for the rest of my life." She stared at him, a long, searching look, peeling back layers of his carefully constructed calm. There was fear in her eyes, a weariness that went bone deep, and perhaps a faint, fragile spark of something else, a question, unvoiced. "Are you sure?" In that instant, he knew this wasn't just a blind date. It was a precipice, a moment where someone had laid bare their deepest wound, waiting to see if he would flee. And for the first time in years, he didn't want to. A shared silence settled between them, not awkward, but necessary, allowing the weight of her revelation to expand and fill the space. The soft hum of the cafe slowly returned, the low chatter, the barista's methodical grinding. Laura kept her eyes on her coffee cup, tracing the rim with a thoughtful finger. Liam waited, a quiet patience settling over him, knowing that to push would be to break the fragile thread that had just formed. Finally, she looked up, her expression softer, though still shadowed by caution. "You really want to hear the story?" she asked, her voice a quiet challenge, offering him one last chance to retreat. "Yeah," he replied simply, his gaze steady. "If you're okay with telling it." She nodded, taking a deep, fortifying breath. "It happened 4 years ago. I was 26, living in an old apartment building with my parents downtown. They were visiting from out of state, celebrating my mom's retirement. It was a normal night. Takeout, bad TV. I went to bed early." Her voice was even, almost rehearsed, a story polished by countless retellings to therapists, to well-meaning friends who struggled to absorb its magnitude. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the smoke alarm. At first, I thought it was a false alarm. They went off all the time in that building, but then I smelled it. The acrid burn of plastic and wood. She paused, her eyes distant, reliving the inferno. The fire started in the unit below ours, electrical fault or something. It spread fast, too fast. A shiver ran through him. A phantom chill. I remember the heat first, like the walls were breathing fire. The hallway was already filled with smoke when I got out of my room. I yelled for my parents, but they were in the guest room, farther from the door. I tried to get to them, but the flames were licking up the stairs. My arm caught on a burning railing as I ran down. That's where most of this came from. She gestured vaguely to her sleeve, a new, intimate understanding settling between them. The pain was like nothing I'd ever felt, sharp and deep, but adrenaline kept me moving. I made it outside, screaming for help. But by the time the firefighters got in, it was too late for them. Laura's words hung in the air, raw but controlled. No tears, no tremor, just facts delivered with the detachment of someone who had replayed the nightmare 1,000 times. They didn't make it, she finished quietly. I survived because I was closer to the exit. But for months after, I wished I hadn't. The burns covered my left arm and part of my shoulder. Third degree in places, skin grafts, infections, physical therapy that felt like torture. It took over a year before I could even lift a cup without pain shooting through me. Liam listened, picturing the chaos of that night. The wail of sirens, the relentless glare of hospital lights, and the mirror. He asked gently, remembering her earlier words. She offered a wry smile, the first truly genuine one he'd seen. It softened the edges of her face, revealing a latent beauty. That was the hardest part. For weeks, I avoided them. When I finally looked, it was like staring at a stranger. The scars aren't pretty. They're raised, discolored, twisted. I used to cover them with makeup, but it never worked. Eventually, I just stopped trying to hide from myself, but from everyone else. That's different. Now, it was her turn. What about you? You seem like the type who listens more than he talks. Why are you here? Really? On a blind date? He leaned back, surprised at how easy it felt to open up. Her honesty, a magnetic pull. Grew up poor right here in the suburbs. My dad was a mechanic. Mom cleaned houses. We scraped by, but there was always that feeling of being a half step behind everyone else. Kids at school had new clothes, vacations. I had hand-me-downs and summers working odd jobs. It stuck with me. That sense of not being enough. He sipped his coffee. The bitterness of familiar taste. Relationships. They've come and gone. A few girlfriends in my 20s, but they always ended the same way. You're a good guy, Liam. But I don't have ambition. But I'm too comfortable with simple. But I pull away before things get real. Because I'm used to people leaving when they see the cracks. So yeah, I retreat first. Saves the hassle. A comfortable quiet settled again. But this time it felt connected, intimate. They had uncovered a shared thread, their loneliness, not about superficial flaws, but the deeper, more profound belief that no one would stay long enough to see past them. Laura met his eyes, a silent question in their depths. So, why are you still sitting here? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He considered it, then answered with a raw honesty that surprised even himself. Because you're the first person in a long time who gets what it's like, not just surviving, but figuring out how to live again. And maybe I need that reminder. 2. She nodded slowly, processing his words. Then, almost tentatively, she said, okay. They talked a little longer after that. Lighter things. Favorite coffee spots. Her quiet love for the fog rolling off Puget Sound. But the profound heaviness of their earlier exchange lingered. A good kind of weight. Like they'd cleared space for something real. As the cafe began to empty, the streetlights flickering on outside, Liam glanced at his watch. We don't have to call this a date, he suggested, the words soft. An invitation without pressure. No expectations. What if we just try being friends? Two people who don't want to disappear into the world alone. Laura considered it, her fingers tapping a gentle rhythm on the table. Then, a slow, genuine smile bloomed on her face, reaching her eyes this time. I'd like that. They stood, paid the bill he insisted. She relented and walked out into the cool evening air. The sidewalk was damp from an earlier drizzle. A typical Seattle evening. They didn't hold hands or exchange promises of forever, but as they parted ways, her towards the bus stop, him back to his truck, Liam felt a subtle shift. This wasn't an ending. It was the start of a path where, for once, neither of them had to walk alone. And for the first time in years, that didn't scare him. Their first goodbye was a prolonged moment, a lingering gaze that held the quiet electricity of unspoken possibilities. The sunset bled across the western sky, painting hues of bruised purple and soft orange as they finally turned, each carrying a piece of the other into the encroaching dusk. After that first meeting, their friendship unfolded in small, unhurried steps, like the way the Seattle fog would sometimes lift without warning to reveal a clear, wide sky. They exchanged numbers, but there were no immediate bursts of texts. A couple of days later, Liam sent a simple message. "Hey, hope the week's treating you okay?" She replied with a photo of a cloudy Seattle sky, captioned, "Better than yesterday." That became their rhythm quiet check-ins, nothing forced. They began to meet casually. Their first few gatherings were at a park near his job site, a green oasis tucked between warehouses. He'd bring deli sandwiches. She'd arrive with steaming coffee. They'd talk about the mundane at first, the relentless rain, a funny patient story, a clumsy fall from a ladder that bruised his ego more than his tailbone. But gradually, the conversations deepened, weaving a delicate tapestry of shared intimacies. She'd share snippets of her demanding hospital shifts, the quiet satisfaction of guiding burn victims through their new realities, yet also the deep, bone-weary exhaustion of reliving her own trauma through their pain. One evening, after a particularly grueling day on the construction site, Liam received a text, "Rough shift, mind if we walk?" They met along a waterfront trail where joggers and dog walkers moved like specters through the mist. Laura was quieter than usual, her long sleeves pulled down despite the mild air. An instinctive gesture. "A coworker made a comment today," she said eventually, her voice low, almost swallowed by the ambient sounds. "Nothing, Mina. Just, you must be so strong to deal with that every day." Nema. But it brought back all those stares from strangers, the pity, the disgust. She fell silent for a few days after that. No replies to his cautious texts. He didn't push. Just sent a single message, "Here, if you need." When she resurfaced, it was with an apology and a promise to explain over coffee, her eyes holding a deep weariness that touched him. It was then he began to truly understand her pattern. Her scars were not merely physical. They were a shield, a vivid reminder of loss that made her recoil when vulnerability nudged its way in. Laura still hid them religiously, always in long sleeves or scarves. Even on warmer days, he'd catch her tugging at the fabric unconsciously, as if it were an armor she couldn't quite shed. He never brought it up directly, but he knew the doubt it harbored within her, the fear that one glimpse would send people running. It mirrored his own hesitancy, the walls he'd built around his simple life to deflect judgment. In her, he saw a reflection. Both survivors, patching over cracks they believed made them unlovable. A few weeks later, he mentioned a charity build. He was volunteering for a playground at a community center for children, recovering from burns, designed with shaded areas and soft surfaces. "You should come," he suggested casually over lunch one day. "It's this weekend, no pressure, but it'd be cool to have you there." Her face tightened immediately. "I don't know, Liam. Being around all those people, I'd just be the center of attention for the wrong reasons." She glanced at her sleeve, the implication clear. He nodded, not arguing. Later that night, he texted, "If you decide to go, I'll be right there with you the whole time. You don't have to be strong alone." It was honest, stripped of heroics, a quiet offer to simply stand beside her. To his surprise, she showed up. It was a sunny Saturday morning, the air at the community center buzzing with the cheerful clamor of hammers and children's laughter. He spotted her walking up the path, and his breath caught. She wore a short-sleeved yellow tee, the first time he'd seen her arms fully exposed in daylight. The scars were stark under the sun, a complex tapestry of twisted lines, telling their story without words. Her posture was tense, arms crossed at first, but she met his eyes and managed a small, brave wave. "Hey," he said, walking over, his hand naturally finding her shoulder. A gentle, reassuring squeeze that lingered for a moment. "Glad you came," she exhaled, glancing around. A few adults noticed her, their gazes momentarily lingering before politely averting. But the children, unburdened by social pretense, swarmed her almost immediately. "Whoa, your arms look like mine," one little boy exclaimed, holding up his own bandaged hand. They touched her scars curiously, asking questions without judgment. "Did it hurt? How did you get so cool looking?" Laura froze, her eyes darting to Liam in a flash of panic. He nodded encouragingly, mouthing, "You've got this." She knelt down slowly, her voice shaky at first. "It did hurt a lot, but you know what? It's like being a fire princess in a story. I fought the flames and came out stronger." The kid's eyes widened, captivated, and she spun a tale about a fire princess who transformed her scars into badges of bravery. They hung on every word, laughing and asking for more. By the end, they were begging her to sign their casts or shirts, treating her like a hero. Liam stood back, watching it unfold. In that moment, Laura wasn't hiding. She was shining, illuminated by a fierce, radiant joy. The sun caught her face as she smiled, real and unfiltered, and he realized how truly beautiful she was, not in spite of her scars, but because of the profound strength they represented. As the event wrapped up, she pulled him aside near the new swing set, her eyes still shimmering with emotion. "I never thought I'd do something like that," she said, her voice thick, exposing everything. "Literally. But having you there, it made it bearable. More than that, it made me want to try trusting again, even if it's scary." He took her hand gently, feeling the warmth of her skin, the subtle landscape of her scars beneath his thumb. "I'm scared, too," he admitted, his gaze holding hers, "but I believe we're patient enough for each other. We'll take it one step at a time. Fast or slow, doesn't matter." The soft press of their palms, the unspoken promise in his steady eyes, sealed a fragile new beginning. After the charity event, their connection deepened, settling into a gentle rhythm, like the ebb and flow of the tide. Laura and Liam continued meeting, their conversations flowing easier now, laced with a quiet, growing trust. She'd text him about a good day at the hospital, or he'd share a photo from a job site, a half-built frame against the skyline, captioned "Progress." They weren't rushing anything, but the unseen barriers between them were crumbling, one shared moment at a time. Liam found himself anticipating her messages, the way her laugh cut through the exhaustion of his days, a melodic counterpoint to the drone of machinery. But life, as he knew, rarely stayed smooth. It was early fall when the storm hit, not of rain, but of the kind that tests the very foundations you've painstakingly built. He'd just returned home from a grueling shift, his muscles aching from hauling lumber, when his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. The message was short, stark. "This is from the hospital. Laura listed you as a contact. She's been admitted exhaustion after a 36-hour shift. She's stable, but you should come." His heart plummeted. He grabbed his keys, the Seattle traffic blurring into a haze of taillights and rain-smeared windows as he drove straight there. The hospital was a sterile maze of hallways, the insistent beep of monitors, and the hushed murmur of nurses echoing off cold walls. When he finally found her room, Laura lay in the bed, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. IV drip snaking into her arm, she looked smaller, more fragile than he had ever seen her, a sight that twisted something deep inside him. "Hey," he said softly, pulling a chair close to her bedside, the quiet intimacy of the shared space amplifying his concern. Her eyes fluttered open, and she managed a weak, almost imperceptible smile. "Liam, you didn't have to come, eh?" Her voice was a wisp of sound. "Yeah, I did." He took her hand, careful of the scars, feeling the coolness of her skin against his. A tangible connection in the sterile room. "What happened?" she sighed, closing her eyes briefly. "Just pushed too hard. Back-to-back shifts. A tough case with a kid who reminded me too much of everything." My body gave out, but as she spoke, her voice cracked, and tears, hot and unexpected, slipped from beneath her eyelids. Not from physical pain, but from a deeper wellspring of exhaustion. "I'm so tired, Liam. Not just from work, from everything. The scars, the memories. I feel like I'm always one step from falling apart. And I hate that you have to see this." The weak side, the one that's not put together. He squeezed her hand gently, his thumb tracing the faint rise of a scar. His gaze was unwavering, absorbing her vulnerability. "I'm not here for a perfect version of you. I'm here for all of it." She turned her head away, her shoulders shaking, her words muffled. "What if you get tired of it? What if you realize I'm too broken, too much to handle? Everyone leaves eventually because I'm not whole anymore." Her words struck him like a physical blow, echoing his own long-held fears of inadequacy. But he didn't pull away. Instead, he stayed, a silent, unwavering presence in that dim room, holding her as she wept. It wasn't dramatic. It was profoundly real, mammal kind of raw vulnerability that stripped away all pretense. For the first time, she let her walls down completely, spilling out the fears she'd buried beneath years of resilience. The nightmares of the fire, the consuming guilt of surviving when her parents hadn't, the terror that she would always be defined by her scars. He didn't try to fix it with words. He just listened, wiping her tears with the edge of his sleeve, murmuring reassurances that it was okay to not be okay. "I'm staying," he whispered, his voice a steady anchor in her storm. "Right here. You're not facing this alone." The weight of his presence was a silent comfort, a promise etched in the quiet of the hospital room. The next few days blurred into a steady rhythm. He took time off work, juggling calls to his foreman while sitting in her room. He'd bring her herbal tea from the cafeteria, read aloud from a worn paperback he'd found in the waiting area, some comforting mystery that made them both chuckle at its predictable twists. At night, when the hospital quieted, he'd stay until the nurses gently shooed him out, promising to be back first thing in the morning. It wasn't about grand gestures, but about showing up, proving that he meant what he'd said at the playground. When she was discharged a week later, looking steadier but still fragile, he drove her home to her small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It was cozy, filled with books and plants, yet held a subtle loneliness, the kind born from years of keeping people at arm's length. She hesitated at the door, then turned to him, her gaze soft, invitational. "Come in. I want to show you something." He followed her inside, the scent of old books and something faintly herbal filling the air. She led him to a door at the end of the hall, a room she called her studio. She flipped on the light, revealing walls covered in canvases, abstract paintings of hands marked with scars, faces half-shadowed but illuminated by faint inner light, swirling colors that spoke of both pain and fierce resilience. "I started these after the fire," she explained, her voice soft, imbued with a deep intimacy. "They're not for anyone else. Just a way to make sense of it all." He walked around, taking it all in. The raw emotion poured into every stroke. "These are incredible," he said, his voice husky with awe. "They show strength, not brokenness." She stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, a familiar posture of self-protection. Do you get scared of staying with someone who might never be fully healed? Someone like me." Her eyes, wide and searching, met his. He stepped closer, closing the small distance between them, a quiet urgency in his movement. "We all have our cracks, Laura. Mine aren't on the outside, but they're there. I'm not afraid of yours. I believe we're strong enough to walk this together for the long haul." She nodded, a single tear slipping free. But this time, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. In that moment, the distance between them felt smaller, the connection deeper, a silent understanding passing between their souls. They weren't fixed, not entirely, but they were moving forwards, hand in hand, a quiet intimacy building in the space they'd forged together. That summer marked a turning point for them, quiet and unassuming, like the way the Seattle fog lifts without warning to reveal blue skies. Laura and Liam didn't need fireworks or grand declarations. They just started calling each other partners, lovers. Whatever felt right in the moment. There was no elaborate proposal, no social media announcement. They kept it between them, a private evolution from friends to something deeper, something earned through months of shared vulnerabilities and steadfast presence. It felt natural, an organic shift. One weekend in July, they drove out to the coast, packing a cooler with sandwiches, heading to a secluded stretch of beach near Olympic National Park. The drive was peaceful, winding through evergreen forests, the windows down, salt air mixing with the fresh scent of pine. Laura wore a short-sleeved tank top for the trip. Another quiet first, her scars fully visible under the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. He caught himself glancing at her arm once or twice, but instead of pulling away, she smiled, a radiant, almost defiant joy in her eyes. "It feels freeing," she said, flexing her fingers, as if testing the air, embracing the sensation of sun on her skin. At the beach, they spread a blanket on the sand, the waves crashing rhythmically in the background. People milled around families, couples, but no one stared. Or if they did, Laura didn't seem to notice. She laughed as they splashed in the shallow water, her joy unfiltered, a pure, unburdened sound that made his chest tighten. For the first time, she seemed truly at ease in her own skin, and witnessing that, knowing he'd been part of the journey, made everything worth it. The warmth of the sun on her exposed skin, the way her hair caught the light as she moved, created an aura of unadorned beauty that both thrilled and humbled him. A few weeks later, he took her to meet his mom. They drove out to the small town where he grew up, a place of rolling hills and old farms that hadn't changed much. His mom's house was modest, with a wraparound porch and a garden full of wildflowers. He was nervous, unsure how to introduce Laura, what questions might arise, but when they pulled into the driveway, his mom came out wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face lighting up with genuine warmth. "You must be Laura," she said, pulling her into a hug without hesitation. No awkward pauses, no lingering looks at the scars. Instead, she stepped back, holding Laura's arms gently, her gaze unwavering. Liam's told me about you. You're strong as hell. Girl, come in. I've got pie in the oven. Laura's eyes welled up, but she blinked away the tears, whispering to Liam later. She didn't even ask. That visit sealed something for them. Family wasn't about blood or perfection. It was about acceptance, a quiet, profound embrace. Back in the city, their lives intertwined more deliberately. They joined a support group for burn survivors, attending meetings every other week. Laura shared her story there, her voice growing steadier each time, inspiring others who were still hiding their pain. Inspired by the children at the playground, she started a small art class for kids dealing with trauma, once a month in a rented studio space, teaching them to turn their fears into colors on canvas. Liam would tag along as her unofficial assistant, setting up easels, mixing paints, snapping photos of their proud creations. "You're my deputy photographer," she'd tease, handing him her phone. And tea maker extraordinaire, his job on the construction sites remained the same. Long hours under the drizzle, hammering nails, mixing mortar. But now, at the end of the day, he had someone to come home to. He'd text her from the truck, heading back. "Want takeout?" And she'd reply with a heart emoji, or sometimes just "hurry home." It was those quiet routines that built their foundation, transforming I into we, creating a domestic intimacy that filled the emptiness he hadn't known how to articulate. One evening, as the days started shortening, they sat on the balcony of her apartment, overlooking the twinkling lights of the city. The air was crisp, carrying the faint chill of approaching autumn. Laura leaned her head on his shoulder, her scarred arm resting against his, the wind gently brushing over her skin. The sensation of her body against his, warm and yielding, was a comfort he cherished. "I used to believe no one could love someone like me," she said softly, her voice carrying over the distant hum of traffic. "Not really. Not with all this." She traced a finger along one of the raised lines on her forearm, a gesture of quiet contemplation. He turned to her, pulling her closer, his arm wrapping around her, holding her secures. And now, she smiled, that genuine, radiant smile he'd come to cherish, a softness in her eyes. Turns out it just takes one person willing to stay, one who sees the scars but chooses the person behind them. "You've helped me heal in ways I didn't think possible." He kissed the top of her head, inhaling the subtle scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of the moment settle deep within him. "Oh, we don't have to be perfect," he murmured, his lips brushing her temple. "We don't need promises of forever scribbled on paper. We just need to keep showing up. Keep being real with each other every day. That's enough for me." They watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft, vulnerable pinks, the city fading into dusk. In that quiet, shared space, Liam knew that happiness wasn't about erasing the storms they'd weathered. It was about facing them together, emerging stronger, and refusing to let go. When life tested them most, after all the pain, the doubts, the fears, true love and a profound, quiet peace had found them, and in each other's arms, they had finally found home.